It started with a whisper from the stars, so faint, so strange that at first no one believed it was real. Deep in the quiet hills of China, a giant dish-shaped telescope called FAST, the largest of its kind on Earth, picked up a signal unlike anything scientists had ever seen. It wasn't random static or the usual cosmic noise from distant black holes or exploding stars. This signal had a rhythm, a pattern. It repeated in a way that felt deliberate. At the same time, on the other side of the world, another telescope in California, part of a network built just to listen for signs of intelligent life, caught the exact same thing. Then came confirmation from a new observatory perched on the far side of the moon, shielded from Earth's radio chatter, designed to hear the universe clearly for the first time. All three pointed to the same spot in the sky, a tiny red star called TRAPPIST-1, about 40 light-years away, known to host several Earth-like planets. For weeks, teams of scientists worked in hushed excitement, double-checking every wire, every line of code, every possible glitch. Could it be a satellite? A secret military test? A prank? But the signal kept coming, clean, strong, and layered with mathematical sequences. Prime numbers, Fibonacci patterns, things that don't happen by accident in nature. Someone, or something out there, was trying to say hello. When the evidence became undeniable, the news didn't leak. It exploded. Not through social media rumors or blurry UFO videos, but through official channels. A joint statement from the world's top space agencies, backed by universities, governments, and independent experts. We have detected a non-terrestrial artificial signal of extraterrestrial origin, read the release. No hype, no speculation, just cold hard facts. And yet the world stopped. People gathered in city squares, not in panic, but in awe. Parents held their kids a little tighter. Strangers looked up at the night sky together, as if seeing it for the first time. In classrooms, students asked questions teachers couldn't answer. In bars and cafes, debates raged. Are they friendly? Are they watching us? What do they want? Behind closed doors, world leaders scrambled. Emergency meetings were called at the United Nations. Military advisors warned of unknown threats. Diplomats argued over who should speak for Earth, but scientists urged caution and unity. This isn't about one country, said a lead astrophysicist during a rare public briefing. This is about all of us. We're not just Americans or Indians or Brazilians anymore. We're Earthlings. The signal itself didn't carry words or images, just structure, like a knock on the door, a test to see if anyone was home and smart enough to notice. And Earth had noticed. Now came the harder part, what to do next. Some wanted to reply immediately, send music, photos, a digital time capsule of human life. Others warned against it. What if they're not peaceful? Asked a Security Council member during a tense session. What if this is how invasions begin, not with lasers, but with friendly messages? But the longer they waited, the more the public demanded action. Not fear, not silence, a response. Because deep down, after centuries of wondering if we were alone, humanity finally had proof that we weren't. And that changed everything. School children started drawing pictures of alien worlds. Musicians composed songs about cosmic neighbors. Engineers sketched ideas for new kinds of spacecraft. For the first time in decades, people weren't just thinking about the next election or the next viral trend. They were thinking about the future of the species. About legacy. About what kind of message we wanted to send into the dark. And then, just as the world braced itself for a long wait, the signal changed. A second transmission arrived, stronger, richer, packed with data. This time it wasn't just math. Buried in the code were symbols, diagrams, even what looked like star maps. It took teams of linguists, AI researchers, and physicists working around the clock to begin decoding it. And when they did, the room went quiet. The message wasn't a greeting, it was a warning. Embedded in the signal was a clear, structured ultimatum. It came from something calling itself the Galactic Council, a group of civilizations that had been watching young, developing worlds like Earth for a very long time. According to the message, humanity had crossed a threshold. Our radio waves, our satellites, our early attempts at space travel, they'd been noticed. And now, we were being evaluated. The Council laid out 3 conditions. Stop building nuclear weapons, reverse the damage to our atmosphere, and agree to outside monitoring of our planet's health. If Earth met these terms within 1 year, we would be welcomed into a larger community of worlds. If not, the message didn't say attack or destroy. It used a colder word, quarantine, meaning Earth would be isolated, cut off from any future contact, left to rise or fall on its own while the rest of the galaxy moved on. At first, many dismissed it as a hoax or a misinterpretation, but the data held up. The logic was too consistent, the structure too advanced. This wasn't a movie. This was real, and the clock had started ticking. Overnight, the tone of the global conversation shifted. Wonder gave way to worry. Hope mixed with fear. Protests erupted in some cities, people demanding immediate disarmament and climate action. In others, nationalist groups claimed it was a trick to weaken sovereign nations. Conspiracy theories flooded the internet. But even the skeptics couldn't ignore the raw truth. Something out there knew who we were, and it was holding us accountable. Yet in the quiet moments between news alerts and policy debates, something else began to stir. A sense of shared fate, a strange quiet pride. Because for all our flaws, all our wars and waste, Earth had done something remarkable. We had listened. We had understood. And now we had a choice. Would we double down on old divisions? Or would we finally act like one planet? No one knew the answer yet. But as the first days of the countdown passed, people started looking at each other differently. Not as rivals or strangers, but as crewmates on the same fragile ship, drifting through an ocean of stars. And somewhere, far beyond the reach of human eyes, a council of ancient civilizations waited to see what the newest voice in the galaxy would say next. The message from the stars didn't just sit in government files or scientific reports. It spread like wildfire through every corner of daily life. Within hours, it was on every screen, every radio, every street corner conversation. People weren't just talking about aliens anymore. They were talking about us, about what we'd done to our own world, about whether we deserved a second chance. At first, many thought it was a mistake. Maybe the signal was misread. Maybe it was a test. But as more experts confirmed the translation, over and over in different countries using different systems, the truth sank in. Someone out there was watching. And they weren't impressed. The Galactic Council's message was clear, cold, and precise. No threats of war. No demands for worship. Just 3 simple rules. Stop making nuclear weapons, fix the damage to the air and oceans, and let others verify that we were actually doing it. Fail, and Earth would be cut off, left alone in the dark, forever labeled as a species that couldn't grow up. Panic hit fast. Stock markets wobbled. Some countries went silent. Others held emergency broadcasts. In living rooms from Tokyo to Toronto, families sat together, not arguing about politics or prices, but asking the same question. What do we do now? Government scrambled. Military leaders warned that giving up nuclear arms made nations vulnerable. Oil and coal companies pushed back hard, saying climate action couldn't happen overnight. National pride flared. Why should Earth take orders from strangers light years away? But then came the counter-argument, whispered at first, then shouted from rooftops, what if this is our only chance? Social media, usually full of noise and nonsense, suddenly turned serious. Videos popped up of kids planting trees, factories switching to clean energy, communities sharing food and tools. Artists painted murals of Earth surrounded by stars, not with flags, but with hands of all colors reaching toward the sky. A quiet movement began, not led by politicians, but by ordinary people who realized that survival wasn't about power anymore. It was about trust, cooperation, humility, yet not everyone agreed. In some places, protests turned angry. We won't be controlled by space overlords became a rallying cry for those who saw the message as an invasion of sovereignty. Conspiracy theories exploded. Some claimed the whole thing was a hoax by global elites to force a new world order. Others insisted the council didn't exist and this was just fear-mongering. But even the doubters couldn't ignore the changes happening in real time. Satellites showed fewer smoke plumes from coal plants. News reports showed retired generals calling for nuclear disarmament, not out of weakness but wisdom. Scientists who'd spent decades warning about climate change were suddenly being listened to, not mocked. And then something unexpected happened. Countries that had barely spoken in years started talking again. Not about trade deals or borders, but about survival. Secret backchannel meetings turned into public agreements. Old enemies shared technology. A small island nation offered its clean energy grid as a model for the world. A desert country opened its solar farms to international inspectors. It wasn't perfect. There were delays, arguments, setbacks. But for the first time in living memory, the world wasn't just reacting to a crisis. It was trying to solve one together. In schools, teachers stopped lecturing about history as a series of wars and started asking students, "What kind of future do you want to build?" Kids wrote letters not to Santa but to the Galactic Council, promising they'd recycle more, waste less, be kinder. Some even recorded songs or drew pictures to send into space, hoping their voices would be part of Earth's reply. Meanwhile, scientists worked day and night to craft a response that wouldn't just say yes or no, but show who we really were. Not the polished version, not the propaganda, the messy, beautiful, flawed truth. They gathered music from every culture, drums from Africa, flutes from the Andes, electronic beats from Seoul. They included photos of sunsets, of newborn babies, of farmers tending fields. But they also added raw footage, wildfires, flooded cities, protests, hospitals overwhelmed. Not to shame Earth, but to say we see our mistakes, and we're trying to fix them. The hardest part? Convincing everyone to agree on one message. Every nation wanted to add something. Every group had a demand. But slowly, through endless video calls and sleepless nights, a draft emerged. One that spoke not for one government, but for all of humanity. As the deadline crept closer, tension grew. Would we make it in time? Would the changes be enough? No one knew if the council even cared about effort. Maybe they only cared about results. But something had already shifted inside people. The fear of being judged from space had somehow made us look harder at ourselves and each other. In villages without electricity, people gathered around battery-powered radios, listening to updates. In cities, strangers helped neighbors install solar panels. Factories retooled overnight. Fishermen reported cleaner waters. The air in some of the world's most polluted cities began to clear, not because of laws, but because people chose to act. It wasn't magic. It wasn't instant. But it was real, and through it all the stars kept watching. No one knew what the council would do when the year ended. Would they send another message? Would they ignore us? Or would they come closer? But one thing was certain, Earth had changed. Not because aliens forced us to, but because, for the first time, we saw ourselves as one family on one small planet, spinning through an unimaginably vast universe, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to earn a second look. The turning point didn't come with a speech or a treaty signed in some grand hall. It came quietly, through actions, not words. People started doing things not because they were told to, but because they finally understood. There was no them anymore. Only us. At first, the idea of global unity sounded like a dream too big to be real. After all, Earth had spent centuries divided by borders, beliefs, languages, and old grudges. But the message from the stars had done something strange. It hadn't scared humanity into submission. Instead, it had held up a mirror. And in that reflection, people saw something they hadn't noticed before. How small their differences really were compared to what they shared. Factories that once churned out weapons began retooling to build wind turbines and water purifiers, not because governments ordered it overnight, but because workers themselves asked, "Why are we making things that destroy when we could be making things that heal?" In boardrooms, CEOs who once fought regulations now called competitors to share clean energy blueprints. "If we're being watched," one said during a rare public interview, "let them see us at our best." Schools became hubs of hope. Children didn't just learn about climate change, they acted on it. Classrooms turned into recycling centers. Science fairs featured solar-powered phone chargers built from scrap. Kids wrote pledges. "I'll eat less meat. I'll walk instead of ride. I'll speak up when I see waste." Their energy was contagious. Parents started changing habits too, not out of guilt, but because they wanted to match their children's courage. In places where clean water had been a luxury, communities banded together to build filtration systems using local materials. In crowded cities, rooftops bloomed with gardens. Old buses were converted into mobile clinics powered by solar panels. No one waited for permission. They just started, and something remarkable happened with the world's biggest powers. Instead of pointing fingers, they began sharing. A country that had guarded its nuclear secrets for decades opened its facilities to international inspectors, not as a sign of weakness, but as proof of trust. Another, long criticized for its pollution, invited scientists from rival nations to help monitor its air quality in real time. The data wasn't hidden, it was posted online for everyone to see. This wasn't perfect harmony. There were still arguments, delays, moments of doubt. Some leaders dragged their feet. Some industries fought back. But the tide had turned. Public pressure was too strong. People weren't just demanding change, they were living it. And they made it clear. Anyone who stood in the way wasn't just failing their country, they were failing the whole planet. Even entertainment changed. Movies and music shifted from stories of war and division to tales of cooperation and wonder. A global song, recorded by musicians from every continent singing in dozens of languages, became an anthem of sorts. It didn't have a title. People just called it The Reply. Played in markets, schools, and space centers alike, it carried a simple message. We hear you. We're trying. Meanwhile, scientists and diplomats worked tirelessly on Earth's official response. But this time, it wasn't just a message crafted behind closed doors. They opened the process to the public. Online platforms let anyone suggest what should be included. A grandmother in Kenya submitted a recording of her granddaughter singing a lullaby. A fisherman in the Philippines sent video of coral regrowing near his village. A group of teenagers in Scandinavia uploaded a time-lapse of their school going zero waste in 30 days. The final transmission wasn't just data. It was a living portrait of Earth, not as it wished to be seen but as it truly was, flawed, healing, and full of heart. As the deadline neared, something unexpected happened. People stopped counting down in fear. Instead, they celebrated small victories. A town powered entirely by renewable energy for a week. A river once declared dead now teeming with fish. A former weapons lab turned into a center for clean tech innovation. These weren't just news stories, they were proof that change was possible even in a short time. And through it all, the world stayed connected, not through force, but through shared purpose. Video calls linked classrooms in Brazil and Bangladesh. Farmers in drought-stricken regions shared ancient water-saving techniques with tech startups in Europe. Grandparents taught grandchildren how to grow food without chemicals, reviving knowledge that had nearly been lost. The unity wasn't forced. It grew naturally like grass through cracked pavement, because when people realized they were part of something bigger than their neighborhood, their nation, or even their generation, they rose to the occasion, not as heroes, but as humans. On the last day before the reply was sent, there were no grand parades, just quiet moments, families eating dinner by candlelight to save energy, volunteers planting trees in city parks, engineers double-checking the final data burst that would carry Earth's voice into the stars. And everywhere people looked up, not with fear but with hope. Because they knew something the Galactic Council might not. Earth wasn't perfect. But it was trying. And sometimes trying is the bravest thing a species can do. When the transmission finally launched, a beam of light carrying music, images, data, and raw honesty, there were no cheers. Just silence. A deep collective breath, as if the whole planet was holding its hand out, palm open, saying, "Here we are. This is who we are. We're not asking to be saved, just seen." And in that moment, whether the stars answered or not no longer mattered as much, because Earth had already changed. Not because aliens demanded it, but because humanity chose to believe for once that it could be better. Together. The reply left Earth on a beam of light, racing through the silent dark at 186,000 miles per second. It carried no weapons, no demands, no lies. Just truth, raw, messy, and real. Music from every corner of the planet. Images of sunrises over mountains and children laughing in rain. Data showing both the scars we'd left on the world and the green shoots pushing through the cracks. And at the very end, a simple question. We are learning. May we join you not as subjects but as students? Back on Earth, time didn't stop, but it slowed. People didn't go back to arguing over old divisions. They waited. Not with fear, but with a strange kind of calm. Because something had already shifted inside them. They'd done what they thought was impossible. They'd spoken as one voice. And that alone felt like a victory, no matter what came next. Weeks passed. Then months. Life went on, but differently. Factories kept running on clean power. Nuclear warheads stayed locked away, their parts repurposed for medical isotopes and space research. Rivers kept healing. Forests grew thicker. And every night millions looked up at the stars, not as distant lights, but as possible neighbors. Then one ordinary Tuesday it happened. A new signal arrived. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft, steady pulse, cleaner and clearer than any before. It came through the same network of telescopes that had first heard the call from TRAPPIST-1. Scientists held their breath as the data poured in. No math this time, no warnings, just a single symbol repeated gently like a heartbeat. It was a shape known to every culture on Earth, though drawn in a way no human hand ever had. A circle with lines radiating outward like a sun, or a seed opening or hands reaching out in all directions. In the universal language of science, it meant one thing: dialogue. The Galactic Council wasn't sending orders anymore. They were offering a conversation. In mission control rooms, in university labs, in living rooms lit by phone screens, people cried. Not from relief alone, but from something deeper: recognition. They'd been seen, not just as a planet of problems, but as a people with heart. The Council hadn't praised Earth's perfection. They'd honored its honesty. News spread fast, but this time there were no riots, no panic, no wild theories. Just quiet awe, because everyone understood. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. Within days, the Council sent more. Not commands, but gifts. Digital packages filled with knowledge. Blueprints for fusion reactors that used seawater as fuel. Designs for air purifiers that could clean a city in hours. Medical scans that detected disease before symptoms appeared. All shared freely with no strings attached. Only one note accompanied them: use wisely. Grow together. Scientists stayed up for nights, not to decode threats, but to understand wonders. Engineers wept when they saw how simple, elegant solutions could solve problems they'd struggled with for decades. Doctors tested new diagnostic tools in remote villages, saving lives within weeks. And all of it, every breakthrough, was shared openly across borders. No patents, no secrets. Just progress passed hand to hand. But the real change wasn't in the technology. It was in the way people saw themselves. Before the signal, the future felt like something that happened to you, shaped by politicians, corporations, or luck. Now it felt like something you helped build. A teenager in a small town could download a council design and help her community build a clean water system. A retired teacher could join a global network translating new knowledge into local languages. A farmer could use satellite data, now shared by every nation, to grow more food with less water. The idea of us versus them began to fade, not because someone outlawed it, but because it stopped making sense. When your neighbor's clean energy powered your clinic, when your child's school used lessons from another continent, when your air got cleaner because a factory thousands of miles away changed its ways, you realized you were already connected. The stars had just reminded you of what was always true. And Earth's reply, the one that stunned the Council, wasn't just in the data it sent. It was in what happened after. While other young civilizations, the Council later shared, had responded with pride, demands, or silence, Earth had done something rare. It had shown vulnerability. It had said, "We've hurt our home, but we're trying to heal it." That honesty, more than any tech or treaty, earned respect. Now new projects began, not just to receive knowledge, but to give back. Artists created digital galleries of human expression to share with other worlds. Musicians recorded new songs blending Earth sounds with the harmonic frequencies found in the Council's signals. Students wrote essays not about war or power, but about kindness, curiosity, and care for living things. Even the night sky felt different. People didn't just look up wondering if they were alone. They looked up wondering what they could offer, not as a species that needed saving, but as one ready to learn and to contribute. And then came the invitation, not to join a galactic empire, not to swear loyalty, but to take part in a shared network, a library of civilizations where every world added its own story, its own discoveries, its own dreams. Earth's first official contribution? A live feed from a newly restored coral reef paired with a child's voice saying, "This is what we're protecting." Light years away in a chamber older than human history, beings who had watched thousands of worlds rise and fall watched Earth's feed. They saw not perfection but promise, not power but patience. And for the first time in a long time they felt something they hadn't expected: hope. Back on Earth, no one declared victory. No one threw a parade. But in homes, schools, labs, and fields, people kept working, planting trees, sharing tools, teaching, healing, building. Because they finally understood. Being part of something bigger didn't mean losing who you were. It meant becoming more of who you could be. The stars hadn't come to judge Earth. They'd come to remind it of its own light. And in answering back, not with fear but with truth, humanity had done more than survive. It had begun to belong. The real change didn't happen in space. It happened right here, on the ground, in neighborhoods, in the quiet choices people made every single day. After the Council's reply, after the first wave of shared knowledge began flowing into Earth's systems, something settled over the planet. Not excitement, not fear, but a deep, steady calm, the kind that comes when you finally know your place in the world. And in the universe, people stopped waiting for permission to do good. They just did it. A village in a dry region used a simple water harvesting design sent from the Galactic network to pull moisture from the air, something their grandparents had tried with clay pots, now upgraded with gentle, clean tech. Kids in that same village taught their parents how to read the new weather patterns, not from old almanacs but from real-time data shared by neighbors across the ocean. No one owned the knowledge. It just moved, like wind or rain, where it was needed. Cities changed too. Streets once choked with smoke now hummed with quiet electric buses. Rooftops that used to collect dust now grew food or caught sunlight. Old factories, once symbols of pollution, became community centers where elders taught young people how to fix things instead of throwing them away. Waste wasn't trash anymore. It was a resource waiting to be reborn. And it worked. Landfills shrank. Rivers sparkled. Even the air smelled different, cleaner, lighter, like after a long rain. But the biggest shift wasn't in what people built. It was in how they saw each other. Arguments didn't vanish overnight, but they lost their sharp edges. When your survival depended on cooperation, with your neighbor, your country, your planet, it became harder to hold on to old grudges. Disagreements turned into discussions. Us versus them slowly became, how can we figure this out together? Schools stopped teaching history as a list of wars and winners. Instead, they asked students, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? Classrooms buzzed with projects, not just about math or grammar, but about restoring wetlands, designing fair food systems, or writing letters to future generations. Children didn't dream only of being astronauts or singers anymore. Some wanted to be soil healers, peace builders, story keepers. And adults listened. Even entertainment reflected the new rhythm of life. Movies showed heroes who listened more than they fought. Songs celebrated everyday courage. The nurse who walked miles to help a sick child. The farmer who shared seeds during a drought. The teenager who organized a beach cleanup that grew into a global movement. Fame wasn't about having the most likes. It was about making the biggest difference. And Earth's connection to the stars? It grew but gently. There were no alien ships landing in city centers. No dramatic handshakes with beings from other worlds. The Council kept its distance not out of coldness but respect. They offered tools, not control. Wisdom, not orders. And Earth, for the first time in its history, used that trust wisely. The first joint project between Earth and the Galactic Network wasn't a weapon or a supercomputer. It was an observatory, built not on Earth, but on the Moon. Designed by engineers from dozens of countries, using materials recycled from old satellites and space junk. It stood as a quiet symbol. We're looking outward, but we're doing it together. On the day it launched, people didn't cheer for one nation's victory. They stood in silence, hands on each other's shoulders, watching the rocket rise, not as Americans, Indians, Nigerians, or Australians, but as Earthlings. Back home, life went on, but with a new kind of pride. Not the loud, boastful kind. The quiet kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing when it mattered most. Parents tucked their kids in at night and whispered, "You're part of something beautiful." Grandparents smiled, remembering a time when the world felt broken, and now seeing it stitched back together, not perfectly, but with care. And every evening as the sun set and the first stars appeared, people looked up, not with fear or wonder alone, but with a sense of belonging. They knew now that the universe wasn't empty. It was full of voices just like theirs, trying, failing, learning, hoping. And Earth's voice, once shaky and unsure, had found its place in that chorus. There were still hard days, of course. Storms still came. Mistakes still happened. Old habits died slowly. But the difference was this. No one felt alone in the struggle anymore. When a wildfire broke out, help came from across the planet. Not just money, but people, knowledge, hands. When a community lost power, neighbors shared batteries, food, and stories until the lights came back on. And always the question was, how can we lift each other up? Years later, when new children asked, what happened when the stars spoke to us? The answer wasn't about signals or councils or technology. It was simpler than that. We finally listened, people would say. Not just to the stars, but to each other. And that made all the difference. Today, Earth isn't perfect. But it's healing. Not because aliens fixed it, but because humans chose for once to believe in themselves and in each other. The galaxy didn't give Earth a second chance. It just held up a mirror. And humanity, for the first time, liked what it saw enough to fight for it. So now, when a child in Nairobi, a fisherman in Indonesia, and a teacher in Argentina all look up at the same night sky, they don't see mystery or danger. They see connection. They see home, not just the blue dot beneath their feet, but the whole family of worlds, learning together, growing together, reaching toward the light, and somewhere, far beyond the stars watch and smile.